know, particularly if you're at work and you're communicating, you know, if you're doing a program for a group of people, you know, you kind of need to know what's the level of your audience, you know, because otherwise if your communication is over their heads, then you didn't communicate well. If the communication is below their learning level and it's boring and they're falling asleep, you didn't communicate well. So it's very important to always know your target audience, whether you're doing a presentation, a training program. Anybody do training in here where they work? No? Oh, one guy. Okay. You know, or, you know, whatever. Anytime you're communicating, you have to know your audience, right? So what are the things we look for? Age, education, personal beliefs, occupation, income can be important. Socioeconomic status, ethnic origin, gender, knowledge of the subject, and attitude toward the subject. Is that important to know what people's attitude is? Yeah. As an example, years ago, I had to go through, anybody ever do Six Sigma training? Does anybody know what Six Sigma is? You've heard of it?
I know.
Yeah. It's probably the most, well, for me, it was the most boring training. Okay. I had absolutely no interest in it. I had to go through it because when I worked for Tyco International, all of us had to go through, all people had to go through Six Sigma training. And I didn't like it, I didn't want it, and I had no interest in it. Therefore, my attitude towards the subject restricted me from learning. Okay? So, attitude towards the subject. So if you're presenting something that people have no interest in, you know, you have a very high hill to climb. Okay? What are some of the questions that a listener brings to a discussion? So these are critical because if you're going to be doing a presentation or you're going to be communicating something to one or more people, okay, you want to know what are they looking for in your presentation. So things like, do you, meaning the speaker, do you know something that I, the listener, need to know? That makes sense? So, are people in your audience saying, do you know something that I need to know? Hopefully, they're thinking that. The more relevant the topic, the more attention you receive, obviously. Can I trust you? Does your audience have to trust the speaker? Yeah, because if the speaker is seen as not qualified, for example, then there's not going to be a high level of trust. So, develop trust through accuracy and reliable evidence. If more people would ask that question of politicians, we'd have a lot less politicians get elected. Okay? Am I comfortable with you? A speaker with similar values, beliefs, and experience of the listeners is going to be much more credible. Okay? How can you affect me? Sophisticated listeners are looking for outcomes from the speaker. So basically what we're saying that how can you affect me is the same as what's in it for me. If I'm going to sit here and listen to you, what am I getting out of it? Right? And are you reasonable, making a logical argument and being open-minded? So even if you're making a presentation that is somewhat controversial, if you are able to make a logical argument and be open-minded to discussion, okay, you become much more reasonable to the audience. Make sense? Yes? Yes? No? So, some of the obstacles to successful communication. Stereotypes, prejudice, feelings, language, and culture. So, what is a stereotype? An oversimplified opinion, an image or attitude that people from a particular group are all the same. Anybody have an example of a stereotype? Give me one.
How some countries like Gulf countries look to Indians or other Asian people, they are looking to them, dominating them. They don't give them the respect, even if they are qualified or higher.
Okay, so they stereotype, oh, they're from India. Okay. Yeah, that's a kind of a negative stereotype. You know, years ago, yeah, go ahead.
Can it be beyond the business? Maybe
Sure.
In music, there's different types of music. Some people like to just go for pop music. Some other people like to go for hard music, chord music,
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Also
So people that like kind of soft music have a prejudice, if you will, against people that listen to like hard rock.
Yeah.
Oh, hard rock. you know, those people that listen to hard rock, they're all drug addicts.
No, not really, not really.
No, but I'm saying that's the stereotype.
Yeah, that's right, that's true.
See, when I was growing up in the U.S., you know what was a big stereotype? Blonde women. All blondes are stupid. You know, they used to have jokes. How many blondes does it take to screw in a light bulb? 3. 1 to hold the bulb and 2 to turn the ladder. Those are stereotypes. Now, those are negatives. There's also positive stereotypes, and you mentioned Asian. All people from Asia are very good in math. That's a stereotype. So does that mean if you're not from Asia, you're not good in math? No. But that's what a stereotype means. So those stereotypes, when they start to seep into our communication, become an obstacle. Okay? So really a stereotype, another word for stereotype is really a bias or a slant. Okay? It's not founded in objective evidence. I mean, are all blondes stupid? No. I know just as many stupid brunettes and redheads. Okay? I mean, you see my point. Right? That was a big stereotype, though. It's not so much today, but years ago, if you had blonde hair, oh, she must be really stupid. I don't know where that came from.
Even today, all Muslims are terrorists.
Yeah, all Muslims are terrorists. Yeah, exactly. It's a stereotype. It's a bias. Okay, good, good. So prejudice is a preconceived opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience. So again, you know what? If you go to stereotype and then it becomes almost advanced, it becomes a prejudice. You know, it kind of starts as stereotype, like it's like what you just said. You have a stereotype, and then all of a sudden it becomes prejudicial. Okay, it has a negative impact on people. Okay, feelings, keeping emotions in check, especially in public. So, obstacles to successful communication. Now, there's a difference between being angry, loud, unreasonable, and being passionate. Okay, a passionate person can be an effective communicator, but a person whose emotions are unchecked, all right, becomes an obstacle to communication. Okay. Language, of course, overcoming language barriers by using visual aids. So again, sometimes language itself becomes a barrier, particularly between different cultures. Okay. And in the culture itself, showing respect for diverse listeners, avoiding what I mentioned before, slang, idioms, metaphors, things like that. Okay. Culture. Culture and language kind of blend together. Right? So all of those are obstacles.
A question.
Yes?
What's the difference between this slide and the previous slide about the barriers, the
Wait, give me that
communication
again.
barriers? There is the same information on this slide,
Right.
same as the slide before. It was not this one, in the chapter 1. It is the communication barriers.
What?
Communication barriers. It was culture,
Yeah,
language.
it's just kind of a different look, but it's basically the same general information. In the book, it covers it in both chapters, so this is just another look at it.
Okay.
I wouldn't say there's a difference. It's more of a blending or more of an emphasizing. We didn't really talk about stereotypes and prejudices.
This is only the difference, yes.
This kind of breaks it out in a little more detail. That's the difference.
Okay.
Okay. In the first chapter you were talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it just breaks it out in a little bit more detail than in the first chapter. That's the way it's covered in your book, though. So basically, if you're looking at obstacles to successful communication, you can use the first chapter and this together. Okay, would be a good response to a question. So selecting a delivery approach when you're communicating. You can have what we call a memorized approach, a manuscripted approach, an impromptu, or an extemporaneous. So think of someone who is giving a speech or someone who is presenting a program, communicating, maybe a manager doing this in their department. Okay? Memorized approach is a discussion or speech that is delivered verbatim exactly as it's written by the author. So you're standing there and you're reading it verbatim. Okay? It's a printed program and you're reading it to a group of people. That's called memorized. Okay? Manuscript is more common among managerial and executive discussions or speaking events. It often gives the impression of being read from a prepared script. So, memorized, you're reading something that someone else wrote. Manuscripted is you are reading something that you wrote, directly from a manuscript. And that sometimes becomes very boring. Okay? Anybody ever have that when you're sitting there and somebody gets up to give like an acceptance speech or some kind of an awards dinner, and they read from a manuscripted speech? It's like, oh man, this is boring. Kind of like at the Academy Awards, they do that. Okay? So that's manuscript. Impromptu is a discussion or speech delivered without any preparation or notes. Usually occurs when one is asked to comment in a public forum. That's called impromptu. So you're impromptu commenting, kind of like what you guys do. Okay? It's not scripted. It's not memorized. Okay? It's impromptu. So when you give me a detailed communication explanation on a subject we're discussing, that's basically impromptu. Okay? Make sense? And then extemporaneous is considered the best alternative to speeches. It requires careful preparation, rehearsal, and delivered with visual aids. I guess that's kind of like what I do. I mean, I'm not working off a script. I'm just kind of, I always call it flying by the seat of my pants. Okay? Or sometimes referred to as off-the-cuff remarks. It's not scripted, it's not memorized, not manuscript, it's not impromptu, really. It's more extemporaneous. Okay? So I'm using visual aids for the discussions. Okay? Everybody got that?
Last one.
Yes.
Last one.
This? Extemporaneous is like what I'm doing right now. I'm having discussion and I'm using visual aids, which is the graphics. Got it? Sure? Okay. So, listening skills. Think of marriage. Listening is the ability to accurately receive and interpret messages in the communication process. Okay? Listening is key to all effective communication. Without the ability to listen effectively, messages are easily misunderstood. Communication breaks down and the sender of the message can easily become frustrated or irritated. Wow, does that sound like marriage? How many times you hear your spouse say, "You're not listening to me. You don't care what I think." Okay? And normally they consider the key to good communication, they will tell you, listen, listen, and listen. Okay?
And don't
Less
talk.
talking, more listening. That is really the key to good, not only communication skills, but as we'll see later, also good in negotiation. Okay? Because when you're constantly talking over your opponent in negotiation, you're missing a lot of what's being said, and you're also going to have some difficulty strategizing as to, how to come out with the best deal in a negotiation. Okay? So good listening skills can lead to better customer satisfaction. It can lead to greater productivity with fewer mistakes, increased sharing of information that in turn can lead to more creative and innovative work, and it's not in here, but a more happy marital relationship. That's not in there. Okay. Listening, particularly men. Men don't listen. They don't. I mean, and it's like selective listening. So if your wife says, "Take out the garbage," you don't hear that. Or she says, "Dinner's ready," that I always would hear. Okay. So it's selective listening. Okay. So what are the benefits of better listening skills? Well, we demonstrate an acceptance, that should be of, excuse me, there's a mistake there. Demonstrates acceptance of others' value, promotes problem-solving ability, increases receptiveness to the ideas of others. So if we don't listen to other people, particularly if you're a manager, if an employee is describing, maybe, a better way of doing something, if we're not showing that we're receptive to somebody's ideas, we're going to shut them down. Okay? You stifle creativity when you fail to listen to other people's ideas. Right? also increase self-esteem of the other person. That happens with kids. You know, if we don't ever give our kids an opportunity to be heard, meaning we don't listen, sometimes can stifle their self-esteem. Okay. Helps to overcome shyness or excessive talking, and creates empathy with other people. What is empathy? What does that mean? Empathy. What's it? Sensitivity. Yeah. What's the difference between empathy and sympathy? Are they different? Yeah, very different.
Empathy, I know what you feel.
Good. Very good. I know how you feel.
Sympathy, I share you the same feeling.
Well, yeah, sympathy is more I pity you. Empathy is I understand how you feel. So if you're a manager, okay, do you want to have empathy for your employees or sympathy for your employees? Empathy. You should not have sympathy. You should not pity an employee. You can tell an employee, yeah, I know how you feel. Okay? I know exactly the way you're feeling about this particular issue. Don't say, oh, you poor thing, I feel so sorry for you. That's the worst thing to do with an employee because you enable them that way. Okay? Make sense? Essential skills for active listening. So, these are things we can do to make sure that there's an active listening and a good communication going on. First of all, paraphrase others as they speak. Occasionally summarize what others are saying to verify your understanding. So if your manager is giving you instruction, you say, okay, wait a minute now, from what you're telling me, you want me to do this, this, and this. Yes, that's right, that's exactly what I'm saying. That's called paraphrasing. Do we do that? Sure.
So they hate coming and going back to their office.
Yeah, I know. I used to just take notes, because I used to have a lousy memory. I have a better memory old than I did when I was young. And you got to go in and say, oh, I forgot, what was this you wanted me to do? You feel like an idiot then. So yeah, paraphrase. Same thing, we do this with our kids. Now, what time did I tell you to be home tonight? Okay, then they have to repeat it. What happens when you go in a restaurant? Does the waiter or waitress paraphrase your order? Yeah, they always repeat your order back to make sure that it was communicated accurately, okay? That's paraphrasing. Okay? Reflect feelings, listen to the content of the speaker as well as comprehend the emotion being used, okay? So you have to kind of reflect on the feeling that is being portrayed in the communication and then basically reflect that back, okay? So if they're very happy about something, you're happy in response. If they're very sad about something, you can be a bit sadder in your response. Like, oh, my dog just got hit by a car. Things like that. Okay. Reflect meaning. Focus on the logical content of the discussion, concentrating on the facts and content. Okay? The meaning. Understand the meaning of what's being said. Reflect conclusion. So reiterate and confirm with the speaker what was said to avoid confusion of end result. So here, we're paraphrasing while the conversation's going on. Here, once the conversation's completed, you may want to go back and just kind of retouch on what was said to confirm understanding. This basically, they call it, essential skills for active listening, but this is kind of more like, it's almost like feedback.
Briefing.
Yeah, briefing. Yeah, you're briefing the communicator on what was said, so there's no misunderstanding. It's very important, okay? And you do this in person, you do this on the phone. What about emails? Do we do that through emails? Yeah. Yeah, if somebody sends me an email, I'll send an email back. Yes, understood your message. I'm going to send you this, this, and this. Okay. So that's basically reflecting on the conclusion. So we do it verbally, we do it in writing, we do it through email. Follow through is show interest in activity that you are taking action as a result of someone's feedback. Is that important? Yeah. Anybody ever do surveys at work? Okay. Okay, so you do a survey. What kind of a survey do you do at work?
Customer satisfaction.
Yeah, usually they do like satisfaction surveys, okay? So people in the company do a satisfaction survey, And what a lot of companies do wrong is they don't follow through. So you take the time to do a survey, but then you don't get any feedback. So if that happens, what happens the next time the company's going to do a survey? Nobody's going to participate because, well, yeah, I took my time to do this survey, but the company never provided me any feedback. Or they thank you for doing the survey, but then nothing happens. Okay? They may tell you what the survey, results were, but if you're doing a satisfaction survey, they say, well, so many people want us to do this, so many people want us to do that. But if this and that never happened, then there's no follow-up. They tell you the results of the survey, but they don't take action to correct certain problems. Make sense? So it's very important when you do follow-through, okay? Because if somebody communicates with you, you listen, and then you provide feedback, and you also follow through on recommendations, that's more of a complete communication process than if you just blow the person off. Okay? Or it's kind of like when you apply for a job. You see a job on the internet, and you contact maybe it's an employment agency, and you send them your CV and a very nice email, right? And then what happens? You get a response back. Thank you for sending, your CV. Did anybody ever do this on the internet? Apply for a job? Yeah. Thank you very much for sending us your CV. And then the magical word, we'll be back to you shortly. And then 5 years later, you still haven't heard anything. Is that what happens?
Even in the interviews, by the way.
Huh?
During the interview, when they interview you, sometimes these people are close will call you back. So when you hear this word...
Oh, that's the end. You just eliminated yourself, yeah. But I used to go through this with agencies all the time. So yeah, we'll be in touch. We'll be in touch. We'll get back to you. And then I had an agency call me 9 years after I had sent them a CV. 9 years. I was in the U.S. I was over in the Emirates working, and the guy says, "Who is this?" Oh, whatever it was, the XYZ employment agency. And I'm thinking, and I said, "What's?" Well, we got you. We have your CV on file. And I'm thinking, I says, "It's got to be 5, 6 years ago." And it was 9 when I looked it up. Okay, that's a long follow-through period. Okay? So follow-through is a very important part of the communication process. Guidelines for constructive feedback. Oh, nothing worse than cold coffee. Unless it's a Starbucks Frappuccino with a shot of espresso and no whipped cream. Oh, look at that. She crashed. That's it, I have to get something now. That's okay. So, guidelines for constructive feedback. Give both positive and negative. What does that mean? Balance your feedback to avoid morale issues. Where would you do that? How about, and you guys get, I'm sure you do, job evaluations, performance evaluations? So, and you sit down face to face with your manager, and they go through your previous 6 or 12 months work.
Performance appraisal.
Huh?
Performance appraisal.
Yeah, performance appraisal. Do they balance positive and negative feedback?
Always negative?
It's all negative?
Always.
Well, the point is, why is it important to balance it? Think of when I give you the subject matter, but if you apply this to like a performance appraisal, that's a communication method. It's certainly a feedback method, okay? So why is it important for a manager to balance that? Is it important?
It is.
I once had a manager say to me when I was in HR, this is when I was working for Tyco, I was doing performance management training for our managers, which I did every year because they needed it. And the manager said to me, when I know the performance meeting is over? And I said, no, when? And they said, when I make the employee cry. Okay. So that's one of the problems we have to watch out for. So we always used to train our managers that when you're giving, performance feedback, which in essence is your performance evaluation, you want to provide both a positive and a negative approach. So, obviously you want to stress some of the positive things that the employee accomplished over the course of the year. And, of course, you have to give some negative feedback, but we don't always have to look at it as negative feedback. We can sometimes call it improvement feedback, okay? Here's some of the areas where I think you need to improve. That's considered negative feedback, but it's just, again, it's the way it's communicated. What are you going to say? You want to say something?
Yes, there is. They are saying this. If you give the negative and the positive feedback, sandwich method.
It's what?
Sandwich method.
Oh, the sandwich method. It's like making a sandwich.
Yes.
So one slice of bread is positive, and the other slice is negative.
Yes. You start with you did this well, but
Yeah.
but not saying but or something like but,
Well,
and you are
some
saying
areas I
and.
think you're a little weak in. Yeah, it's all the way it's presented. Okay. So if you tell the employee, well, you really did well over here, but boy, over here you really stuck. I mean, you just bombed some of these other programs that we were doing. Okay. You don't want to make the employee feel bad. Right. You want to build them up a little bit, and then you also want to show them where they can improve.
Yes.
So so basically it's like positive reinforcement. You seem to have some problems in these areas. I think maybe you need to spend more time studying or training or whatever the case may be, rather than saying, boy, you're really stunk on this. You were horrible, okay? So you always want to balance it. Now, what do you do if you have an employee who's a total loser?
Improvement.
Kick him out.
Huh?
Kick him out.
Well, hopefully fire them, but yeah. No, let's say you have an employee who just, I mean, you get an employee and they say, well, let's look at your work record this year. Let's see, you were late pretty much 4 or 5 times a month. Your absenteeism is terrible. You never really completed one project on time. And the projects that you did complete, we had to have somebody else redo it. But I really like the tie you wore today. I'm joking.
Not but.
Positive feedback. Something positive. Also, understand the context. So, review the events, stressing the where, the what, and the how. Again, when you're giving, when we think of feedback, probably thinking from the performance evaluation is a good methodology for applying feedback. So, review the event, stress where, what, and how. Document, okay? Where you did well and where you didn't do well. Use common language. So you want to use speech that will not be misunderstood or misconstrued. And again, you want to stay away from, certain colloquialisms or idiomatic language or slang, using a lot of metaphors. Not good when you're providing feedback. The language should be very clear so that it's understood. Okay? Don't make assumptions. The receiver may not have the same perceptions of issues that you have. So don't assume that the receiver of the feedback takes things as seriously as you or takes things more seriously than you do. So you have to make sure that they understand the level of, sometimes we call the gravity of a situation. How serious it is or how minor it is. Right? Does that make sense?
Why?
Why what?
Why we are not taking some
Well,
assumption?
because if you're being very serious about something, as let's say as a manager, you're talking to an employee about a particular report they didn't get done. They see it as a minor issue. You see it as a major issue. You have to make sure that they understand it's a major issue. Otherwise, they're not going to take your feedback as seriously. Okay?
Not compare their needs.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not compare.
Yeah. Okay. Also, you want to focus on behavior rather than people. So feedback should be given on actions, not on personalities. Again, a lot of people make that mistake. They focus on a person's personality rather than the actions of that person. This is critical in negotiations, by the way. Don't, and one of the golden rules of negotiation, okay, is focus on the issue, not on the personality of the person you're negotiating with. Very important. Okay? So if you're sitting there across from somebody and they got tattoos all over their neck and spider webs on their arms and so on, you don't want to focus on that. You want to keep focused on what the issue is. Okay? Not that I really don't like this guy's tattoos. And that happens, by the way. It kind of, when we talk about prejudice, that can sometimes prejudice you in providing feedback. There's something about a person you don't like. So you start to focus on what you don't like about the person, and then you start to lose track of what the issue is between you and the other person. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Managers do that. Because managers are human. They make a very common error they make are focusing on employees' personality rather than on the issue at hand. So if the manager happens to like you, they sometimes have a tendency to rate you higher. If they don't like you, they have a tendency to rate you lower than what you deserve. Maybe they don't like the fact that the guy wears an earring or has spiked hair or hair that's all different colors. Well, you won't find that here, but in the U.S. you get all kinds of weird people. Okay. Spiked hair, all like green, blue, red, spiked up. Ever seen anybody like that? They actually go to work that way sometimes. So it's like, so you want to focus on the behavior, on the performance, not on the personality. Okay. Make sense? Okay. Know when to give feedback. So timing is critical in order to make feedback an effective action. Now, if you are, the same thing with kids. Okay, if you have to discipline a child, right? When is the best time to discipline a child? If a child does something wrong, when is the best time to discipline? I don't mean hit them, beat them. Provide feedback on their behavior.
At the same time.
Yeah, when it occurs. The longer we wait, the less effective that feedback is going to be. Same thing at work. Okay? If you do something wrong at work and your manager hits you up about a week later, it's like, huh? What are you talking about? Well, I've noticed last week, no, it should be immediate. Okay? So effective feedback be descriptive. What does that mean? Based on what you have observed. So when I provide feedback to someone, it's based on what I have observed. So what do you observe when you're providing feedback? You are observing behaviors. Okay? If I observe behavior, or I observe something you have done, and I'm going to provide feedback. Now that doesn't necessarily mean it's negative feedback. Okay? I mean, if I observe an employee who is helping other team members, and at the end of the day, I call that employee aside and I say, I noticed you were very cooperative helping some of the other people with their work today. I just wanted to kind of point that out, that I really appreciate that behavior. Okay? Be descriptive. Be objective. Stick to the facts. Focus on what you know. Okay? So don't exaggerate. Okay? Every time I turn around,